Today, we're going to build a stock sentiment app that not only shows you how much money you have made, it also searches for tweets related to your purchased stocks so that you can get market sentiment on them in one dashboard. Now, if you're wondering how we're going to do this, I'm going to be using a vector database in order to store some tweets that I scraped and turn them into vector embeddings so that we can do similarity searches on them. So for example, if I search for tweets with AMZN referring to the Amazon symbol, I can get 1 tweet back or 5 tweets back and display them here in a ticker. It's up to me. What is great about doing similarity searches on a vector database is that we are not directly searching for the term AMZN. We are looking for words that are similar to it. So a tweet that says Amazon stock's on fire will return back to us also. All the tickers will be rendered dynamically, meaning that whatever stock I choose to say I purchase will influence the tweets we get back. Pretty cool, right? In this tutorial, we will learn about how to work with vector embeddings in a database, as well as learn how to build a full-stack investment platform using TypeScript and Next.js. We will also use a free API in order to get the most up-to-date stock prices. So, what are we waiting for? Let's do it. Go ahead and click on the link in the video description below so we can get started. Okay, so first off, we're going to sign up to our vector database. So I'm just going to go ahead and sign in. Please sign up for free. If you don't have an account, it's going to give you plenty of free tier credits. So I'm just going to sign into the portal like so. This is what your dashboard should look like. Okay, I'm going to walk you through it step by step. The first thing you're going to need, however, is your API key, and you can get that down here under the organization, and then just scroll down and get your API key. So I'm going to go ahead and create an API key. Let's go ahead and call it demo, and I'm going to choose for it to never expire for demo purposes, and I'm going to go ahead and create it. Now this is important. Please copy this and keep it safe because you're going to need it later. Okay? So great, that's all you're going to need. And now let's get up your terminal because we're going to create a project, and we're going to actually create a project that can already use Singlestore, so already has the configuration that you need in order to connect to the Singlestore database. And in order to do this, well, first off, I'm just going to navigate to a directory on my computer that I want to work in, which is called WebStorm Projects. And I'm going to use the command npx create Singlestore app. Okay, so that's one word, space, that's one word, space, and then your app name. You can call this whatever you wish. I'm going to go ahead and call this stock sentiment app. Do a space again, and you're going to also now need your API key. So just go ahead and paste it. So once again, npx create Singlestore app, whatever you want to call your app, and your API key, and just hit enter. And this will spin up a project with all the configuration, like I said, in order to connect with your Singlestore vector database. So we're just going to wait for that to do its thing. And great, you should get a message saying your workspace is ready. So now let's go back here, close this, and you will see that if you scroll up here, you will see a workspace called Stock Sentiment App here. Okay, so Stock Sentiment App Workspace Group 1, that has been created for you. So in here, essentially what we're going to do is create a database, but we're going to do that with a Python script. Don't worry if you know no Python at all. I'm going to talk you through everything step by step. So the script is going to be in Python, but we are going to be building the app in JavaScript. Okay, so right now we are done with this. Let's go ahead and open up the code that we just configured. So all I'm going to do is bring up WebStorm Project. This is my preferred code editor of choice. Please feel free to use whatever code editor you wish. And I'm just going to open it up. So I'm going to go open, and then in my WebStorm projects, I'm going to get the stock sentiment app and open it up. Okay? So there we go. Here is our Singlestore app boilerplate. Now I'm going to just go ahead and delete a bunch of stuff that we don't need. So you should have a source directory with a client and server directory. And in your server directory, you will have these 3 files. So let's work on those 3 first. If you double click on server, well, this is looking good. I'm just going to get rid of the semicolons as I don't really like them, but everything else looks good to me. So we're essentially good with this. Now the roots TS file, this one we are going to have to delete quite a lot. We're going to keep the import everything as expressed from Express. The only thing that we are going to import here is something we're going to write ourselves. So I'm just going to delete all that, and it's read data. That is the function that we're going to write ourselves. And then we don't need to import anything from the package fs. I'm going to get rid of that semicolon. We do need the .env package, and we do not need the body parser. Okay? We also don't need this definition here. So I'm just going to get rid of that. We'll keep this just to test that everything works. And I'm just going to delete all the others for now. So all of them, that's right. So that is the only things that should be in this file. While we're here, I'm just going to get .env and use config in order for us to be able to use the .env package. And there we go. So this is looking good. And finally, our connections TS file. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger for you. We will keep this, we will keep that. We will keep the function to connect to Singlestore, as we will be using that later. So I'm just going to get rid of those semicolons. We're going to keep the function to stop Singlestore, as we will also be using that. We don't need the function to get databases, and in fact we don't need any of the others in here. So once again, I'm just going to go ahead and delete all those like that. Great. So just two functions should exist in here: the function to connect Singlestore and the function to stop Singlestore. So amazing. That is our whole server directory done. Here's the content of server TS once more. Here's the content of routes TS once more. And here is the content of connection TS once more. Before we write the read data function in the connect TS file, I'm just going to do the same for the client directory. So let's get rid of all these. I'm going to minimize that. And in the client, well, let's start with the index TSX. So once again, I'm going to keep all that. That is looking good. We're just going to have one CSS file, SCSS file to be precise. So I'm going to import index SCSS, and let's actually go ahead and create that file. So I'm just going to create a new file called index.scss, and all our styling will be kept in this one file. Okay? Because it's a really small project, which means we don't need any of these files in this directory. So I'm just going to delete the whole directory called SCSS. And now let's check out the app TSX file. So once again, I'm just going to delete everything in here. So let's just return an div for now. So just an opening and a closing div. Get rid of the semicolons. And I'm just going to do const app, as I prefer functional expressions, and I'm going to do export default app. Okay, so there we go. And this means I can get rid of all that as well. So now that is the content of my app TSX file. My utils, well, I'm just going to delete that as well. So let's delete the utils directory. I'm also going to delete the pages directory. So let's get rid of that. And in the components, we're going to create some totally new ones. So let's get rid of all those too. So let's just empty out the components directory as well. Amazing. So we've got the app TSX file, which looks like this, the index SCSS file, which is currently empty, and the index.tsx file, which looks like this. And that should be the only things in the client directory, apart from the empty components directory right here. Wonderful. So now we are done with the client directory. Cool. This is looking great. Okay, now before we begin, I'm just going to show you the package.json file, because this has all the dependencies that we are using here today. Let's go ahead and get rid of some that we are definitely not using. So I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of all of these. We're not using Axios. We're not using these two, either Bootstrap or Chart.js. We are not using Day.js. We're not using Formic or Formic UI. We're not using React Chart.js 2 either. And I'm just going to keep these as they are. Okay, so remember that if anything is not working in the future, if you're watching this way in the future and something doesn't work, it could be down to the version that we are using here. So if yours says something like 5, 17, 13, just change it to 4 as it is in this project and just reinstall those dependencies using npmi, making sure you are in the stock sentiment app. Okay, that is really important, so please do make sure that yours are exactly the same versions as I am using here today. If you still aren't sure, then please go ahead and check out the final project code in the video description below too, so that you can pull this down and compare. Okay, so that is the package JSON. Of course, we also have our scripts here, so we're going to go ahead and start this app. So I'm just going to go ahead and do npm run dev, just like so. And then this should show up on localhost 3000. Of course, there isn't going to be much here because, of course, we've deleted everything. So in the div with the ID root, there should just be one div, as that's all we're returning in the app tsx file. And great. And let's check out the roots now. So I'm going to just minimize this, get rid of the package JSON. And we do have one root written here in roots, and that is API hello. So let's just check that works. API hello, and it does say Singlestore. So we have returned back Singlestore. So we know the front end works and we know the back end works. Let's continue. Okay, so before we get to doing anything at all, I think let's first focus on actually creating a database of all our tweets. So I've gone ahead and actually hosted these tweets for you online as a raw CSV file. If you look in the video description once more, you can see, I'm just going to post it here. If you go to my GitHub repository and tweet sentiment stock market, you will see a CSV file. Okay, the CSV file looks like this. It's very large, okay, so it doesn't make it beautiful and searchable. And we just need the raw file of this. So it's really simple. It just has 2 columns of text and the sentiment. So here we go. We have some text of this. For example, kickers on my watch side, trade method 1 or 2, see previous posts, and this has a positive sentiment. So I'm actually already just getting the tweet and just saying if it's positive or negative. So let's get the raw version of this. So just click raw here. I'm going to copy this and just keep that in mind for now, because we're going to essentially turn this into vector embedding so we can do similarity searches on it. So let's go back to here. Now, we need to essentially create that database, okay? And we're going to do so with a Python script. So under develop, so just click on development here, I'm going to create a new notebook. It's a personal notebook, and we're going to start with a blank one, and we're just going to have to name it. And I'm going to call this tweets. So just like that. And let's go ahead and create. Great. So this is looking good. So first off, I'm just going to write the markdown for you so you can follow along. We're going to install required libraries. So in Python, make sure Python is selected. I'm just going to install these 2 packages, okay, wget and OpenAI, as well as the version of OpenAI, thanks to this, because I don't know if you're going to be watching this in the future, and I want you to be able to follow along. So just run that. Wonderful. Now we're going to import the wget package, and this is going to essentially allow us to get our CSV, so our raw CSV here. So first off, let's actually define our CSV file path. And I'm just going to paste in that raw CSV, so the path to the raw CSV, just as a string. Okay, so that's all I have done. Next, I'm actually going to get the file path itself. And this is essentially, again, just make sure it's a string. It's just this last little part here. Okay, so whatever the file is called, I've called it tweet sentiment stock analysis.csv. And just go ahead and paste that in like so. Great. Now, this little piece of code, essentially what it's saying, if a file path doesn't exist, we want to get that file path. So we're going to get that file path, okay, from the internet, so from the full CSV file path here, and then we're just going to print out file downloaded successfully. Otherwise, if it does exist, we say file already exists in our local file system. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to run this piece of code. And great, that is now done. So the file downloaded successfully because that's the first time we did it. Great, now let's see if it's worked. So I'm just going to paste that. I'm going to read the CSV file and I'm just going to essentially check it out here. So there we go, we're essentially getting that raw CSV file. We can kind of see it as a table thanks to the pandas import, which has the method of read CSV that we pass through our file path into. Okay, great. And then we just got the 5 top rows back using df head. Let's move on. Now we're going to create a database, and for that we're actually going to use SQL. So just get SQL from the drop down, and if a database called stock sentiment does exist, we're going to drop it, we're going to get rid of it, so we can start fresh and create a database if not exists called stock sentiment. So let's run that. Just make sure you are in the stock sentiment app workspace up here, and that is now done, and I should be able to select that database from here. So here we go, stock sentiment. So there we go, just make sure that is selected from now on. Now, once again, we're going to use SQL, and we're going to use that database, and we're going to create a table if one doesn't exist. So here we go, we're going to use the database called stock sentiment, and if a table called tweets does exist, we're going to drop it so we can start fresh and create a table called tweets that has the text column, the sentiment column, which also takes text, and an embedding, which we are going to do later on. So this is important as we are using OpenAI and the model of text embedding 3 small. This is essentially linked to text embedding 3 small, this specific number. So there we go. If you actually want to look where that is, if you look on the OpenAI documentation and the text embedding small, you will see the output dimension. So that's why I've used that number 1536 right here. Great. So amazing, we've created that table that should now exist in our database called stock sentiment. The next thing we're going to do is actually connect to our database. So down here, I'm going to select Python, and we're essentially going to run that command. So we're creating a connection engine. And now I'm going to get the values from df. So that is here, essentially this table right here, df. And we're going to save it as the variable data. So that's what I've done. Next, we're going to import JSON. And we're just going to essentially, for each row in the data in that table, we'll pass it through the method JSON dumps and save it to JSON data. So we're creating JSON data out of our table essentially. Okay, because now, of course, we do have information for the text and for the sentiment. The one thing we don't have is for the vector embedding. So in order to get the vector embedding of the text in our table, so essentially the text and the sentiment, I'm going to go ahead and use OpenAI. So I'm going to import the package OpenAI. We're going to pass through our OpenAI key, API key, and we're going to essentially create an embedding using the text embedding 3 small model that I just showed you. And then we're going to save it under embedded data. So let's go ahead and go back to OpenAI. I am already logged in, which means I can just get my API key under settings. And then if you go ahead and go to your profile, user API keys, I'm just going to create an API key. So I'm going to create a new key. Once again, I'm just going to call this demo. So create that like so. I'm going to copy it and keep it safe. For now, I'm just going to paste it in like so. I will be disabling this later on, so please make sure to use your own. And I'm just going to go ahead and run that. Okay, this is a lot of data, so it might take a little bit of time. Just pause it if you need and continue when you are done. In the meantime, while that's do its thing, I'm going to go ahead and continue with my app. So for now, let's just work on the stylings. I'm just going to get rid of those and minimize this and go into our client and go to the app tsx file. Now, what do we want to do with this project? So the styling, like I said, is going to be super basic. We don't want to focus too much on the styling as that is not the point of this tutorial. So what I'm going to do is just make a div. Let's give this the class name of app, so we can style it up. And I'm just going to create a section. This section is going to have the class name. Let's go ahead and put user info. And then I'm going to have a p element, welcome. And then we're going to just have our username. Now I'm going to just have some fake data, okay? Just because, you can connect this to a database, but for the sake of the tutorial, I just want some fake data that you can then store wherever you wish. I'm just going to go ahead and create a data ts file for now. So data.ts. Okay. And this, I'm going to just create a fake user. My fake user, let's just make this a little bit bigger. It's going to have the username of Anya, just like so. And then I'm just going to have 3 investments. Okay, so let's just pretend I invested in 3 stocks. And those stocks are going to be symbol AAP. The display name for this stock is Advanced Auto Parts Inc., just like that. We're also going to have the price we bought the stock at, which is going to be $61.30 US. The number of shares we own, so shares, let's just say 3. And the currency we bought in, so USD. Let's just do that. And the time stamp of when we bought it at. Okay, so we bought this a while ago. So that is going to represent this whole object in my array investment is going to represent one purchase, I guess, one investment that I did. Let's do another one. So this time I'm just going to replace this symbol with BIOF. And this is Blue Fuels Inc. So let's do Blue Biofuels Inc. You can sort of spell fuels correctly. And we bought this at 0.095. We bought 1 share in US dollars. And then also let's have a timestamp for when we bought this at. So there we go. And let's just do one more. So here we go. Let's buy some Amazon shares. So AMZN is what it exists on the stock market. Its official name or display name is Amazon.com Inc. And then let's do 14457, number of shares 2. And again, let's just put a timestamp of when we bought those 2 shares. So great, this is my fake data. Like I said, at the end, you can put this in a database. It is up to you. So now that we have our user, let's go back in here, and I'm just going to import that user. So let's go ahead and do import user from data ts. So now we have that user. I can just go ahead and user name. So what I've done is got that object, that whole user object from the data.ts file. Okay, so here it is. We of course also need to export it. So let's do export default user. Okay, great. So amazing. We're saying welcome to the username. So the whole object is this, and we're using dot notation to get username. So we should return the string of Anya. So it should say welcome Anya. Next, we're going to have an H1 element, and this is just going to show us the portfolio amount. So at the moment, I think what we should do is just maybe, let's go ahead and write portfolio amount. I'm going to set it up here as const portfolio amount, making sure to spell it exactly the same way, portfolio amount. And I'm just going to hard code it to 0. Of course, it won't be hard coded. We're going to do some maths in order to get the portfolio amount eventually. Great. And let's maybe stick a $sign in front of that. Next, I'm going to have a H2 element, and let's break this up with span elements. So let's have one span. I'm just going to get rid of that for now. one span right here, and then another span right below it. And the first span is just going to hold the change in US dollars. However, I'm going to format that change. So I'm going to actually call it formatted change. And then we'll just put USD. And again, let's just define it up here. So const formatted change, and just set it to be 0 for now. Great. And here I'm also going to have the overall percentage change. So overall percentage change, and again we'll just put the percentage sign here, and this again we will calculate, but for now I'm just going to set it as a const and make it 0. Great. So that is my first section. That is the whole section. Let's create another one. So here is a second section, and here I'm actually just going to map out our data onto little cards. So I'm going to do that. Let's first of all create a card. So in components, I'm going to create a new file called card tsx. So just like that. And then const card equals. So we're just going to create a component and export default card. And let's just return something for now. So I'm just going to create a div. Okay, so how many cards do we need to create? I think we should create a card for each investment. So I'm just going to get my curly braces and wrap that card in it. I'm going to get the user element, and for each investment that exists in that array, I'm going to map it out onto a card. Okay, so let's wrap that card in parentheses. So for each investment that exists in my investments array on the user object in the data TS file, I'm going to, once again, let's just wrap this one more time. I'm going to essentially just pass that whole investment through. Let's get that investment and just pass it through as a prop. And we're also going to need a key for this because we need to have keys on these. I'm just going to use the investment symbol as the key, as that will always be unique. Okay, so the symbol exists on the investment object. So great. This is looking good. So this means that if we are passing through the investment onto the card as a prop, we also need it here. So investment. Okay. And the investment has a display name. So just for now, just to check everything works, I can get that investment display name and see if it shows up. So let's go ahead and check that works. Of course, we do also need to actually import the card. So let's do so, import card from, and let's go into the components and get that card. Great. We do also need to import React in this file. So just go ahead and do the same. And now let's actually go back to localhost 3000, and amazing, we have done it. This is looking good. Okay, so great, we are mapping information onto cards. Let's actually continue with this app. So at the moment I'm passing through the whole investment. I'm just going to get each property out that object. So the investment object has the symbol, the display name, as we saw below, the price bought, the number of shares, the currency, and the timestamp. Okay, so it has all these things. You can just put them like this. So I'm going to do that so we can see everything just a little bit more clearly. Okay, I think that looks better. And now that we have essentially destructured that object, I don't need to get the object and use dot notation to get the display name. I could just use display name, okay, because we have it here. Wonderful. So let's actually build this out further. So I'm going to give this the class name of card, just like so. And then what I'm going to do is create another div, and this is going to have the class name of card info. And another div, and this is going to have the class name of symbol info, just like that. Okay, and in this div further on, so we're just putting more divs in, let's give this the class name of icon container, because it's going to hold our icon container, and then we'll have the icon itself. So div class name icon, and then we'll just put the symbol in here as an h4 element, so we can just use symbol from the investment object. Great. So after the whole icon container, we're going to create another div, and this is going to have the class name of info container, just like that. So in here we're going to have an h3 element. This will have the display name, and then we're going to put how much stock we bought at the current price. So let's have a p element for this, and here I'm going to actually just show the number of shares that we bought. So it could be like the number 3. Let's say we bought 3 Amazon, it would show 3 AMZN as that as the symbol for Amazon. And then we'll have the price we bought that share at and the currency we used. Okay, I'm just going to put like this cool little dot here just to space them out. And maybe let's have some text, right? Because just in case we forget what that is for. So this is how much stock you bought at the current stock price, or at the, not current, at the then current stock price. There we go. Great. So there we go. Let's just spell container correctly. So after we've done that, here essentially is my closing div for the symbol info. So after the symbol info, I'm going to create another div, and this is essentially just going to give me the days open. So I'm just going to write open, and then let's have a p element here in order to show that. And now I'm just going to copy these. So we've got the open. Let's also have the high. Let's have the low. Let's have the current price. Let's have the daily change. And let's have the daily percentage change. So I'm just going to percentage there to differentiate that. Those 5 things, or those 6 things, should I say, are all going to be fed in from an API, okay, to give us the most up-to-date stock data. But it's a free API, so don't worry. Okay, and once we have that, I'm going to create one more of these. However, this is going to show the amount you made and lost. So maybe let's write that down, amount you made and lost. I'm just going to comment that out. So we will maybe just change this to an h3 element, and then we'll have a p element here to show the changes since you bought the stock. So there we go. Let's have that there as well. Okay, we will fill those out based on some calculations that we do. Okay, wonderful. So that div is to contain those 2 things. And great. Just after the, or just before the last div, I'm just going to create one more div here, so just like that. And this is going to have the class name of info ticker, where I get sentiment analysis from our tweets on that stock as well. So info ticker. There we go. And I'm going to have P for the sentiments. So sentiment. And we're going to define sentiment up here. So const sentiment equals blur for now. Okay, so we've got the structure of our app. Let's go ahead and style some things up so it looks a little bit more interesting. So let's go to our index CSS file, because at the moment, if we look at our app, it just looks like this. It's just a bunch of writing. It's not very interesting or fun. So let's work our magic. Okay, like I said, this is super basic. I don't want this to be a styling tutorial in any way, shape, or form. So let's just go ahead and give everything the font family of Verdana, backup of Tahoma, sans serif, as well as the final backup, and make all the writing white. So 255, 255, 255. Okay, cool. I'm also going to say that each H1 element is going to have a font size of 50 pixels. Each H3 element is going to have a font size of 13 pixels. And then each H4 element is going to have the font size of 9 pixels. Also the color of a kind of more transparent, why is it RGBA 255, 255, 255, 0.5 for transparency. And then font weight, I'm also going to go with 100. Okay, all our P elements are also going to look a certain way. I'm just going to have the font size of them be 12 pixels, and the span, well, I'm going to do margin right 10 pixels. Now the whole body of the app, well, it's going to get rid of any default margin and padding. So let's just maybe move this up a little bit. Margin 0, padding 0. Let's center everything using display flex. So let's initialize flexbox. Let's center everything from left to right. And also let's center everything from top to bottom with a line item center. Before that to work, we need a height. So I'm going to give it 100 viewport height. Great. Now I also have a background image that I want to use. So I'm going to go ahead and do that background image URL, and then I'm just going to drop it in. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do background size cover as well. So background size cover. Okay, so in the public directory, I'm just going to essentially put that in there. So now in the public directory, you'll see an image called Trading Background PNG. You can use whatever you wish, or you can use my one from the code that I will share with you in the video description below. The URL for this now, so we need to go into the public directory from our index CSS file. So let's do that as a string. We're going to go into public and then get Trading Background PNG. So that's all I've done. If I look at it now, it looks like this. Okay, so the font has been styled, we've centered everything, and we've added a background. Let's continue. Now let's actually grab the element with the class name of app itself. I'm going to give it a background of RGBA, so it's transparent once more. So I've picked this color out. Let's go 0.28 opacity, or 0.78 actually. And the border radius, I'm going to round it off by 16 pixels, so round off the whole element's corners. Let's also give it a box shadow. The box shadow is going to be 0 x-axis, 4 pixels y-axis, 30 pixels blur, and then the color is going to be RGBA for transparency, black. So let's do 0, 0, 0, and then 0.1 for opacity. Now let's also give it a background filter. I'm going to do blur. Let's blur out 5 pixels. So it's going to have that like blurred effect. I'm going to give it a border as well, 1 pixels, solid, RGBA. So kind of gray essentially, 26, 0.3. I'm going to pad it out also. So I'm going to do padding 30 pixels and border radius 8 pixels. Okay, so if we check this out now, we do actually have 2 border radiuses, so maybe we don't need that. Let's just keep it at 16, sorry. You will see that the edges are rounded and that the color is darker and blurred. Okay, it's blurring it. You will see it's more blurred than it is to the image. Great. Now let's get the element with the class name of user info. I'm going to use display flex on it, initialize flexbox, justify content center, because this has a lot of child elements in it. So we're going to center them all from left to right. We're going to make them go in a column using flex direction column, so they stack over each other from top to bottom. And then let's also align item center, so center everything from top to bottom. Let's also give this element a margin of 30 pixels, margin at the top, 0 on the right, pixels at the bottom, and 0 on the left. Okay, so now this should look like that, and we have way more to go. Okay, let's also grab the user info element and say that any h2 element that lives in it and any h1 element as well, I'm going to give a margin of 2 pixels. Okay, now we're also going to grab the element with the class name of info container and just hard code a width to it of 183 pixels. So that is hard coded now. Okay, you will see this element here is 183 pixels in width, so that is looking good. And now let's actually get the card itself. So the card, the whole card, I'm going to give each card a background of white, but transparent white, so maybe a kind of off-white with 254, 254, 254, 0.1 for opacity. Let's also round off each card, so border radius 5 pixels, padding 10 pixels on the top and bottom and 20 pixels on the left and right. Margin of this is going to be 7 pixels on the top and bottom and 0 on the left and right. And I'm going to hard code the width of each card to be 1000 pixels. So each card now should be really, really long. Okay. Next thing we also need to do, I'm just going to move this over. Let's maybe zoom out of this a little bit. So there's each card. We need to make these not stack over each other, but go left to right. And they all live in the card info. So maybe let's grab the card info next. So .card info. Let's use display flex in order to initialize flexbox, and that will make them go essentially from left to right, just like that. Okay, there we go. And now we're going to space them out equally. And to do that, I'm going to use justify content space between. Okay, so now each one should have equal space around it. So that is looking quite nice, if I do say so myself. So there we go. I think that looks good. Let's continue. So we've done the card info. Next, let's get the symbol info. So symbol info. And I'm just going to, again, initialize flexbox, so they kind of go from left to right. And I'm now going to get the icon as well. The icon, I'm going to just make a little cute circle that is 38 pixels high. And then we're also going to give it 38 pixels width, so it's a square technically now, but if I use border radius 50%, it will magically turn it into a circle. And then I'm also just going to give it a border color, so RGBA, again with the transparency, kind of like this transparent red-ish color that I've picked out, so 0.5% opacity. Let's make it also solid and 3 pixels. Great. So at the moment, it will look like that. Let's just center the writing in it. And I'm just going to also move it out a bit. So margin right, 20 pixels from the right. And I'm going to use display flex to initialize flexbox, justify content center to center the writing left to right, and align items center to center it from top to bottom. And it already has a height, so that will work. Great. So there you'll see that's the end result. Wonderful. Now I'm just going to get the icon container, just like so. I'm going to use display flex again to initialize flexbox. Use flex direction, so flex direction column, so it appears on top of each other. Justify content center as well. Okay, so really center that circle. And then few more things to do, mainly around the info ticker. So the info ticker, we want this to essentially kind of look like it's scrolling, right? But first, I'm just going to give it a border top of RGBA. So just make it a line at the top, 254, 254, 254, 0.2 opacity, solid 1 pixel line. Let's give it a height as well of 30 pixels. We need to give it overflow hidden as well, so no overflow can be seen. And I'm just going to give it a position of relative for when we start the scroll. Now the text in the info container, so P, I'm going to make it orange, so make the text color orange, but a transparent orange of 255.166.0, 0.5 opacity. The position of it is going to be absolute in comparison to its parent, which also has a position. Don't forget that it is needed. I'm going to say the height of it is 100%. The width of it is also 100%. So the text is 100%. Margin of the text is going to be 0. The line height, I'm also going to be very strict about that to get a certain look. And we're going to do text align center. So if I say this at the moment, the text will just look like that. There is a few more things to do in order for us to get this scroll working. I'm just going to show you now. So first off, let's work on the start position. I'm going to translate X of this to be 100%. So at the moment, this won't do much. It's kind of just appearing. I'm just going to show you where this will be. Here's the info, here's the P. It's kind of here, right? It's off, and because of overflow hidden, we cannot see it. And we're going to essentially make it scroll from here to here. And in order to do that, we need to write an animation. So animation, and let's define our animation. So at keyframes, and let's call it scroll left. So that's our animation name. I could just whack it in here, and I want it to last for 40 seconds, be linear, and continue infinitely. So this should start at 0% of the animation. I want it to be, essentially here, right? This is our starting point. And when it's finished, I want it to be at the other end. So transform minus 100, okay? And that's really it. So now you will see that text essentially scrolling. Okay, so there it is. Cool. I'm not going to have this for now just because it's going to interfere with the rest of our development. What I also want to do is change text to be green if, we're making money, so positive. I'm going to change the color of this to be RGBA 17255.0.5, and then negative is also going to have a color, right? So color of this is going to be a red, but also a transparent kind of red. So 255.0.85, 0.5. Great. So now that we have that, let's actually use this. Well, I'm just going to use it on the app, really, I think. Maybe on the card as well. So essentially, what I'm going to do is change the class name to be positive or negative based on a function. So this function, let's write it here, const get direction, right? We need it to get positive or negative. Const get direction equals, and we're going to pass something through and then return. So whatever amount we pass through, let's say we pass through a 2, we're going to get the amount, and if amount is bigger than 0, so 2 is bigger than 0, it's going to return positive, so this is some nice chaining. Otherwise, it's going to be negative, okay? So if we pass through the amount of -2 here, -2, is it larger than 0? We ask ourselves. No, it is not. So it is negative. We skip this one and we go here. So this will either return the string of positive or negative. Just be aware that this will return a negative if there's no change at all. So just keep that in mind. Okay, because if it's 0, is 0 larger than 0? No, so it's negative. So now we can use getDirection to get either that or that, and we can essentially do that in a few places. We can do it on the span, so I could do class name, and then I can use code, right? I can use getDirection pass through the formatted change. So whatever that value is, obviously at the moment it's 0, it will make this whole span essentially negative. Yeah? Okay, so let's do the same for, I think, yeah, let's do this one too. So class name, get direction, and then we're just going to pass through the overall percentage change in order to change that color as well. So there we go, that's red, and that is currently red also. If, of course, this was 10, then the first one would be positive, right? So it will be green. So that's kind of like a cool way to dynamically change styling. One other thing we can use getDirection for, so I can use the function getDirection, and I can use to add a plus or a negative. So maybe let's go ahead and do that here. So let's put in some code, getDirection, and I'm going to pass through the formatted change. And if it strictly equals positive, and that is true, I'll just return a plus sign. Otherwise, I'll return back a negative sign. Okay, so now we will see a little positive show up here. And if I just make this negative, so like -10, it will show a little negative sign there, even though we kind of don't need that. So that is good to know. Maybe we just put that. We can put an empty string, or we could do and positive. Okay, so now the positive will only show up if this is positive. So make that a 10 again. And there we go. Great. So let's do the same for here in regards to having a triangle facing up or triangle facing down. So once again, we're going to use getDirection. We're going to pass through the overall percentage, whether that's a positive or a negative number. So it will either equal the string of positive, and if that is true, then I can return something, or I return something else. And I've already gone ahead and found these text symbols. So here is this sign. If you want it, you can get it on altcode. So altcodes.net, here they are. Okay. And I'm also going to get the little one facing down. So once again, if I refresh, we get a little triangle facing down. Great. So this is pretty cool. You can use it here, or you can put in a utils file and use it anywhere you want. So perhaps let's do that. I'm just going to create a utils file, new file. I'm going to call it utils.ts. And just paste that function in here like so. And I'm going to do export default, as it's the only one, getDirection. Okay, so just export that function. And of course, we have to import it here. So import getDirection from utils. And now we can use that function in this file. Wonderful. This is looking good. That is the full code there. Okay, so I like how this is looking. Let's just get rid of that. Now I'm going to show you how to use the API to get the latest stock data, and it won't cost you anything as long as you don't make too many requests. So let's go back on the card element, so right in here. And I'm going to write a function called const get current stock price equals, it's an async function, as we're going to have to make a call to our backend. So the URL for this is going to be, we're going to have to define that, And then we're going to try to get the data and catch any error. So try catch error, console error, the error. Okay, and here we're going to do const response. We're going to await that URL that we defined up there. So await fetch URL, and then we'll get the data from it. Again, this is going to return a promise, so we use await and we get the response JSON so that we can get the JSON. And then once we have that, we're going to set the stock data. Okay, so we're going to set that stock up here. So let's just do const stock set stock new state. That does come from React, so we could just do that if we want. Great. Okay, so perhaps let's actually define that URL, and we're going to have to do this in the backend. So we're done with this file, we're done with the styling, we're done with the utils. We'll keep the card and app.ts file, and now in the server directory in routes, I'm going to write my route. So let's just make that a little bit smaller. Okay, so I'm just going to do router get, and let's define a endpoint. So I'm going to go API and then market, and then whatever symbol we pass through, we're going to essentially make a call to an API to get information about that specific symbol. So if it's AMZN, we're just going to get information about Amazon. So this is an async function. It's passed through the request and a response. So just like that. The symbol we're of course going to get from the params. So we go rec params symbol, as we're getting that right there. And now you're going to have to get your own key. So I'm just going to show you where to get that. I'm just going to put in some text here. Replace the API key below with your own API key from here. Okay. So we will go to that in a bit, but here essentially is the URL. I'm going to do backticks as we're going to put in some code. HTTPS www. Well, it's just this, so maybe we can just paste that here, Alpha Vantage Co. And then /query question mark function equals global underscore quotes, and so the and sign symbol. And then here we're just going to pass through our symbol, so equals, and then we're going to put some code, right? So if you want to put in code, you have to put $ and parentheses like that. And then we'll pass through this, so whatever we've got from the params. And then we're going to do and API key equals, and we're going to pass through our API key again as some code. So here we go. That's what I have done. That is the full URL right there. Okay, so there it is. Let's go ahead and get our API key. So I'm just going to copy that, paste it in like so. Okay, and I'm going to say that I'm a software developer. Organization, let's put tutor, and then put in your email address, so ania@codewithania.com, and get your free API key. So amazing, there we go. And here is my dedicated key. Here, I'm going to copy this. Okay, of course you can't use mine, please use your own. And then we're just going to go over to the .env file. Okay, you already have your host and password here. Just go ahead and call this whatever you want. I'm going to call it an alpha key. I'm just going to paste it. So now using process.env, I can get that alpha key. So I can do process env and paste alpha key, and that will be picked up. You can only do that if you have .env here and imported the .env package, as well as actually installed it, which was done automatically for us. Okay. So great, we should be able to essentially create that whole URL now, as long as we pass through the symbol with the params, which we will do. So let's try it out. I'm going to do try and then of course catch errors. So try catch error console error, the error. Okay, so once again, here is the full thing. Please make your screen bigger if you need to see all of that. Otherwise, I'm going to continue. So what are we going to try? Well, again, we're going to get response. So await fetch URL. Let's get the data. Await response JSON. I'm just going to console log that data so we can see it in our terminal and make sure that it's working. But we're also going to send it over with the response. So res send data. We forgot to put the 2 dots here. Another thing we did wrong is use global quotes plural. It should be global quotes. So definitely make sure that URL is written correctly. Okay, so amazing. Let's go ahead and copy this now. And here in the card, I'm just going to paste it like so. However, I am going to use backticks because this symbol, we're not going to keep it as this. We're going to essentially pass through whatever the symbol is, we are passing through onto each card. So it's either A, M, Z, or the other two. Okay, so great. Let's test this out. I'm going to get current stock price. I'm going to put it in a use effect. So use effect, just like so. This is, of course, imported with React to React method. I'm just going to call it like so. And I'm going to keep the dependencies empty for now. Okay, so this should just run once. Okay, so when that runs, we're also going to set the stock, and then we're just going to pass through the whole data for now. So maybe let's console log stock as well, right? Because we are setting stock, which means we should console log out stock just to see what's coming back to us. So let's give it a go. I'm just going to go back in here. Let's refresh. Let's get up our console logs. And great, so now each card is printing out the stock, and here it is. So there's a lot of information here, okay? So each one gets the symbol, the open, the high, the low, the price, the volume. It gets a lot of information, okay, that we're gonna have to use. Now, this is essentially the same as me making an API call to this, right? If we want to get that data. Again, you can see it here, so global quote, and we have all that here because we are console logging out the data each time. You can keep that there or you can get rid of it, it's up to you. This is essentially the same as me doing this, right? Making an API call here and just passing through AMZN, so AMZN, and this is what we get back. Now, this is kind of a weird object to work with. So I'm going to show you how to get the value of the first property. Let's just go back here because we're going to have to work with it. So let's get rid of the roots for now. I'm just going to minimize this. We're getting the whole stock. Do we want the whole stock, however? I think it's good enough. I'm just going to go forward again. If we go into the object and get the global quote and get that object instead. So I'm going to use this string, so global quote. I'm going to get that data. I'm going to go into that object, but just get the property of global quote like that. Okay, so that will get me that whole object, and that's what I'm essentially saving here, right? Okay, so let's go back. I'm going to show you. Okay, and now we just get the object. Okay, just the object that we need to work with. So great, now let's map it all out onto here. So that is being saved to stock on each card. So now I can use that in order to get the correct things showing up. So let's actually wrap maybe all of this. So here, if stock exists, then and only then do we show this div, the div with the class name of card info. So this div stops essentially here. So before the div with the class name of info ticker. So just make sure to wrap yours in that as well, like I did. Okay, amazing. So now we can get a bunch of stuff from that object, so from the API call, such as the open price. So once again, let's get up our code, let's get that stock object, and I'm just gonna get the 02 dot open, making sure to spell it exactly the same as the object property. Let's also get the high. So once again, let's get that stock object. Let's open it up and let's get the 0.3 high property. Let's not forget that dot. In fact, maybe it'll be easier just to copy this whole thing. So I'm just going to paste that in. This is for low. And in fact, it should just look like this. And then we also get the price, which is number 5. Let's change this to be price. Let's also get the change. This was number 9, so I'm going to make this change. And then this one as well. So this was a 10, and this was change percent. Okay, so now we will see all of that showing up like that. This is looking wonderful. I'm happy with that. Okay, a few more things to do, and that is just show the amount we made and lost and the change since we bought the stock. And for that, I'm going to have to do some math based on our data TS file, as well as, the data we just fed in from the API. So let's do it. So for this here, I'm just going to get the stock P&L. And first, let's just check the stock exists. So I'm going to do stock and. And what I'm going to do is essentially get the stock current price. So stock 05 price. And I'm going to multiply it by the number of shares that we bought. And then minus it from the price I originally bought the share at, multiplied by number of shares, okay? So the current price minus the price I bought it out, multiplied by the shares, and then I'm going to wrap all of this, okay, because we need to actually just make it to 2 fixed. Okay, and to do that, I do 2, otherwise it'd be like dot 0.5555, we just want it to 2 decimal points. So that will do that. So that is my stock P&L. I'm just going to put it on 2 lines for you if you prefer. So now I can get that stock P&L, and I could just show it down here. So let's put it in here. Once again, what we can do, I'm just also going to put the currency actually, that is from our data TS file. As I'm going to also style this up, so I'm going to do class name, I'm going to pass through get direction, I'm going to pass through the stock P&L in order to change this to be either positive or negative styling. We also need to import this, so let's go ahead and do that up here. Import get direction from utils file. Great. So we've got our stock P&L, that is looking good. The next thing we want to do is get the P&L percentage change. So once again, let's do some math. P&L percentage change. Once again, we need to check if stock exists. And then what we're going to do is get the stock price again. So we could just get this, get the stock price. And then what I'm going to do is just use minus the price bought divided by the price bought. Okay, so let's wrap that all actually just like so and multiply it by 100. But then the whole thing once more I need to do to 2 fixed figures. So 2 fixed 2. Okay. So I'll put that on 2 lines for you once more. And now I'm going to get the P&L percentage change. So just move it down here and just put it in like that. And stick in a percentage sign. And once again, let's start this up. Class name, get direction, and pass through the P&L percentage change. So now that should show up. Amazing. This is looking fabulous, if I do say so myself. I'm just going to get rid of that for now. And maybe let's make this a bigger so you can see it better. Great. Now, the last thing we need to do is just get the overall P&L and the overall percentage change since our investments. So what I'm going to do, let's just get rid of that, is actually use set state on the app. So let's go back in here, and here what I'm going to do, I'm just going to make this bigger for you so you can see. We're going to collect all the P&Ls from all three of the cards, set P&Ls, and we're going to save them in an array, right? Because we're going to collect them. So we're going to start off with an empty array. Once again, let's just get this from React. So I'm going to pass set P&Ls onto the card so we can use it. So let's scroll down, and on the card itself, so here is the card, do set P&Ls and just pass it through, which means that on the card itself up here, I can get that function. So now in order to get all the P&Ls from each of the cards, what I'm going to do is essentially on the use effect. So right in here, I'm going to say if stock P&L exists, which it should. I'm going to set P&L, so use the function that passed through. And if you want to set, so basically add items to an array and use state, this is the syntax to do it. You get whatever is in the array currently. I'm going to call it old P&Ls, and then you're going to spill it out into that array, so old P&Ls, and then you're going to just add the stock P&L to it. This is a string, as you can see here. I just want to make sure that that is a number because we only want numbers in here, so we can add them all together. And we want to run this every time the stock P&L changes, just in case. So I've added that as a dependency. Great. So now here, I'm just going to zoom out. If I console log P&Ls, just like so, and look in here, I'm just going to inspect this so we can see what is going on. I'm going to refresh this once more. You will see all three are collecting, right? So this is collecting, and this is collecting. So now we can add them all up pretty easily. So on the app TSX, I'm just going to go ahead and add them up. So maybe I'm just going to, what should I do? Let's just add them all up. So I'm going to do const formatted change. Let's just get rid of that, and I'm going to essentially get those P&Ls, use the reduce method to add them all up. So because they're numbers, they should be fine. A, B, we're going to compare one to the other. I'm going to get A plus B, we're going to start counting at 0. And then let's do 2 fixed 2 as well. So let's do 2 fixed 2, okay? So there we go, and now formatted change should show up right here. If it doesn't, you might need to just generate a new API key and just going through all the steps again. Okay, so now that's added 110.86 to -774 and -001, so we are getting that final amount. Amazing. So that is looking good. I can also get the portfolio amount. This will be easy. We just need to essentially bring in the number of shares into this. So let's do const investments equals user investments. So we are getting the amount of investments I have. I'm going to reduce. Again, let's just do A, B. So we can compare A to B, and I'm going to get A plus B price bought, multiplied by the number of shares. I'm going to start counting at 0. So now I have the change, essentially how much I've made, but also we need the initial investment. So I've just got that. So I can now just get the formatted change plus the initial investments. And once again, let's just put it to fixed 2. Okay, and now I can use my portfolio amount. So I'm just going to put that here in the H1. And now let's get the overall percentage change. So for this, I'm going to get my portfolio amount. I'm pretty sure this is, let's just make sure it's a number. So I'm just going to pass it through number. I'm going to minus my investments. And this is already a number, so that is fine. Let's just wrap this in parentheses. Let's multiply it by 100. And then I'm just going to divide it by the investments again. Okay, so now all of that I need to make, once again, to fixed 2. Great, so now I also have the overall percentage change, which is shown there. So wonderful, we have everything that we need. Now, because this is any, we're getting a bunch of weird things happening with TypeScript. I'm just going to wrap that in number as well for that to work. Let's just check this works. Okay, this is looking so good. Okay, this is looking wonderful. This is the full app. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit for you. And finally, let's get that ticker. So let's go back and see if this is done. Okay, this is now finished. It took 18 minutes, but we are done with that. Next, we're going to combine the data. So let's go ahead and do that with this. Combine data. We're going to get the row and put in the embedding into it. So just go ahead and run that code. We're going to get pandas data frame method and pass through the combined data and save it as S2DF in order to essentially rename some columns and put in the embedding. And for that, I'm just going to use this code. So here are our new column names, text, sentiment, and embedding. So let's rename them just like that. Format it a little bit more using that code. Sorry, I'm rushing through this now. And let's get our SQL. So we're going to use the database stock sentiment, and we're going to truncate the table of tweets. Make sure to select Python and run this. If you get an error about a JWT token, you need to reestablish the connection. So just scroll over here and run this little piece of code once more, and then this should work. Okay, great. And finally, I'm going to use SQL to just get the 5 most recent tweets. Okay, and there we go. Those are our 5 most recent tweets from our database, and you will see the embedding has been created here. This embedding, this array of lots and lots of numbers essentially represents this text. Okay, and we can use it to do similarity searches based on these numbers. If you want a deeper dive into vector embeddings, I do have a whole video on this which explains this in more detail as to how that similarity search works, as to what these numbers even mean. So do check it out. If you already know about vector embeddings, then let's carry on. Okay, great. So that is now done. If you also look in databases here in stock sentiment, you will be able to see that database. Okay, so here we go. Tweets, and then you can see the sample data here as well. This is essentially what it looks like. So now let's use it in our app. So let's go back to the code, and in connections, it's now time to write our read data function. So let's do it. I'm just going to do so down here. Okay, so we're going to write that function. I'm going to write export async function. Maybe let's make this a little bit bigger. I'm just going to minimize that for you. Function read data, just like so. I'm going to pass through an object. We'll then also pass through the types. and then we'll write our function. So what we're going to pass through into read data is an object that has a connection, a database, and the embedding. Okay, and now let's define those types for each of these. So the connection, if it exists, is gonna be my SQL connection. The database is gonna be just the string because we're just passing through the name of the database, and the embedding, well, I'm just gonna put any for that. Great. And let's try something and catch any errors. So we're gonna try and catch error console log error, and let's start off with the closed connection being false, and if no connection exists as well, we essentially need to establish it. So we'll get connection and then we'll await, because it's an async function, we're going to await connect to Singlestore. So we're going to get this in order to connect to Singlestore. So let's just await that there, and we'll just pass through the database name that we want to connect to in Singlestore. And then after that is done, I'm going to reassign close connection as true. Cool. So that's only if there's no connection. Otherwise, I'm essentially going to await connection execute. I'm going to just pass through some SQL, and let's save that under, well, we can just get the rows from it. So just like that. And once we get those rows, I'm just going to return rows, go into the first one, and just get its text. Okay, great. So we're going to pass through some SQL into there. However, let's also write something if there is a close connection. So if close connection exists, once again, we're going to await, and this time we're going to stop Singlestore. So that's another async function that we already left in there, okay, to close the connection down again. Cool, and we'll pass through that connection. So amazing, we're console logging the error. I'm just going to return the error as well, okay. There we go. So the line of SQL that we're going to write here, well, we're going to select text. We're going to use dot product embedding. I'm going to explain to you what this means in a bit. We're going to use JSON pack array, and then parenthesis, and then single quotes, and then get some square brackets up, and then we're going to pass through the actual embedding. So just like that, and we're going to pass through embedding like so. So whatever the embedding we are searching for in our database. Again, I will explain this when I've finished writing this in a second. Let's just make sure to write this down correctly. So then we're going to continue as similarity from the table called tweets, and we're going to order by similarity descending, and we're just going to bring back 1. So I'm going to limit by 1 because we're only getting back that first item from our rows text. So what this all essentially means, we're just going to put it on 2 lines for now, but put it back in a bit so you can see everything, is essentially when we're reading the data, we're passing through an embedding from our front end. So for example, say I essentially wanted to search for anything in my database of tweets that has the symbol AMZN for Amazon, and then turning Amazon into an embedding that I'm passing through into here. I'm looking in my whole table called tweets for anything similar to AMZN and returning back 1 in descending order, so we get the most similar item back. Okay, and that's what we're returning, okay, because we're saving it into rows. We only have 1 in there, so I'm just getting that first item's text and returning that back. So hopefully that makes sense. That is the code to do that. I'm just going to bring that back as it was, and let's continue. So we are done here for now. We have written the connection. Next, let's write the root. So under roots here, I'm just going to make this bigger for you. So that is our one root. I'm going to do it again. So I'm just going to move this down here. Let's get our router. We're going to use get. And then let's define an endpoint. I'm going to do API database symbol, and we're going to pass through the symbol. So like I said, it could be AMZN, and we're going to do that in the parameters of the URL. We're going to pass through the request and the response as well. So there we go. And then of course, if we want to get that from here, we need to get it from the param. So let's define symbol first, and then all I'm going to do is use request params symbol. Okay, so AMZ should be passed through into here and saved as symbol. Next, we're going to try something. So try, and once again, let's catch any errors. So catch error, console error, error. We can even have console error here. And what we're going to do is essentially, when we pass through AMZN, we need to turn this into an embedding. That's right. So we can commit embedding against embedding in our tweets table. So what I'm going to do is use do OpenAI. This is a package we need to import. So let's just do import OpenAI from OpenAI. This is one we're going to have to install as well. So I'm just going to do that and do npm I OpenAI. And the version that we're going to be using today, I'm going to show you this in a bit. So once again, that should show up in the package JSON. Make sure you're using the exact same version of OpenAI as I am today, which is 4.5.2.5. Great. So once we have imported that package, let's carry on. So new OpenAI, we're going to pass through our API key. So API key, just like so. And then I'm going to store this in the env files, process env, and we can call this OpenAI API key, or you can call it whatever you wish. So now in my env file, that's one more thing that I'm going to save in here. It's going to make this a little bit bigger. And I'm just going to paste in my OpenAI API key. Great, so save that file and let's continue. So we are now connecting to OpenAI by using our OpenAI key. I'm going to save this as OpenAI so we can use all the methods and properties that come along with that package. And now I'm going to get the embedding, right? So const response await OpenAI, and then we can use embeddings create. And let's define what model we're going to use. I want to define the model of text embedding 3 small. The input of this, well, it's just going to be the symbol that we pass through, right? So just here, AMZN, for example, that's what we want to turn into an embedding. And we also need to put the encoding format. So encoding format float. Great. So once we get that response, well, I'm just going to save this as embedding. So const embedding, we need to get the response, get the data, get the first item from that data, and get the embedding. That's just because the response essentially is a object that has data in it, an array of data, and we just want to get the embedding from the first item. Okay, cool. Now that we have that, we essentially want to get that embedding and we want to send it through into here, right? So that it can essentially look through our database and return back an item that is most similar. So I'm going to use this function. We've already imported it. If you scroll to the top of this file, you will see us importing that. So I'm just going to await it because it is an async function. And I'm just going to pass through the database name, but also the embedding that we just got back. Okay, great. So I'm just going to define this SQL res, just like so. Now the database, I believe we haven't defined this, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and do so up here. So const database equals stock sentiment, as that's what we called our database in Singlestore. And next, we're actually going to use OpenAI once more because this will essentially just return back an item from our database. We want to make a more kind of readable response. And for that, we're going to use chat completions from OpenAI. So let's write a prompt first. So the prompt we're going to write is, I'm just going to use curly braces. We need to decide if Once again, we're going to pass through the symbol. So AMZN, let's say, is a good stock to invest in. I'm going to paste the rest of this as I've already pre-written it. The tweet that is most similar to this from stock sentiment to our database is, and then we have the SQL response that we got from the read data function. Please use this tweet to give market sentiment on the stock and only this tweet. Please limit the response to 120 characters as well. So great, we have written a prompt. Now let's use OpenAI again. So await OpenAI. This time we're going to do chat completions, create, and then we're also going to pass through some stuff. Well, we're going to pass through the messages that we want to send over. So this is an array, and each message essentially looks like this. It has a role. The first role is going to be system. And then we have some content. So here we're just describing what they are. I'm going to put you are a helpful assistant, are a helpful assistant. So that's what we're telling OpenAI to be in this case. And then we're going to do another one where this one is the user, and we're just going to pass through the prompt. So copy that and paste it like so. And then the response, let's save this as response or maybe just completion. There we go. And we're also going to pass through the model of this. The model is going to be GPT-4o. Okay, great. And then we're going to do res send to send over the completion, right? But we don't need the whole completion. This actually is an object, and in the object there's choices. There's an array of choices, so we want to get the first one. And from the first item, we're going to get the message content. Great, so that's what we're sending over. If we make a GET request to here, so let's do that on the card. So here we are, here is the card. Let's write a function in order to do this. So this time I'm going to write a function called get stock sentiment. So const get stock sentiment equals async. And then what I'm going to do is essentially define a URL. So here is my URL. I'm going to do backticks http /localhost 3000 / and then we have API database, and then we're of course going to replace this with a symbol, so either AMZN or the other two. And once we have that URL, we're of course going to, you guessed it, try and catch. I'm just going to copy this catch from here. So what we're going to do is try, well, we're going to await. In fact, we could just copy this as well. So let's copy that right here and just paste it like so. However, we don't want to get the JSON, we just want to get the text this time. And then we're going to set this sentiment, okay? Just going to pass through data into that. And of course, we need to save it up here. So I'm just going to copy this again. And instead of stock, we're going to have sentiment and set sentiment. Great. So now, instead of sentiment here being blur, let's just console log out the sentiment first. So console log sentiment. And of course, we need to call this somewhere. So I'm going to get that. And in here, I'm just going to call this once. Great. Some other things we're going to have to do is just in the env file. We already have our host. We already have our password. We need to also set the DB port and the username. So you can find this here. So if you go to your stock sentiment app and you want to connect your app, you will see everything you need. So here is your password in case you need it again. And access, well, your username is admin, and your password, you can reset it. You can generate a strong one. Okay, so I'm just going to do that and click reset. And that means that your username is admin and your password is the one we just saw. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here. Let's put user name equals admin. I'm going to replace that password now. And we're just going to do the DB port as well, which is 3306. You will see that here. Okay, so essentially we've just taken all this and put it in our .env file. Great. This is essentially for connections to work. So here we go. Host password we are passing through. We also need to pass through the port. So please go ahead and do that, making sure it's a number. And they're also going to pass through the database, which is stock sentiment. Great. Now let's check it out. So I'm just going to inspect this so we can see what is going on and get the console log and hit refresh. And great, we get the tweets coming through. This is great. All we need to do is put them on tickers onto our app. This is so exciting. So let's do it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just go back to my CSS file. So here is our styling, and I'm just going to uncomment this out so that we can get the animation to work. So now let's refresh. And then any second now, we should see the text showing up. So this is looking good. I'm happy with that. Wonderful. Now you might want to go ahead and just add some extra TypeScript to this project, okay? That is totally up to you. So for example, I know that this would be an array of numbers. So we can go ahead and state that this is a number array, okay? You can even add an interface for the investment, and it just means that now you can define the investment. So for example, right here, let's put this in parentheses. And on the card, you can even add types here also. So for example, you can define the interface of card props. And of course, this takes card props. So you can do React FC card props. And that will just define what investment and set P&Ls is. And of course, investments we've already defined. So you can just go ahead and copy that interface and put it here also. Okay, that's just some basic TypeScript for you. Okay, great. The sentiment here will be a string. We don't need the timestamp. I'm not going to define this as this comes from an API and that object could change. And I think this is good for now.